Welcome to the European CME Forum podcast. European CME Forum is a not-for-profit organisation that promotes multi-channel discussion on matters relating to European and global CME CPD. I'm Eugene Pozniak, Programme Director of European CME Forum. We present the next in the series of webinars from the Good CME Practice Group. The Good CME Practice Group, or gCMEp, is a membership organisation for CME providers based in Europe. In today's episode, Katie Eustace of Answers in CME and Carry Pesch of Medcon International are in conversation with Melanie Fleeman of Bayer and Nefeli Georgoulia of AstraZeneca. The focus of today's episode is the value of CME IME in medical affairs educational strategies.
Thank you all for joining us today for this Good CME Practice Group webinar. What we aim to cover today is the value of CME and IME within medical affairs educational strategies. My name is Katie Eustace. I'm Managing Director of Answers in CME, and I'm part of the Good CME Practice Group as the Steering Committee Chair this year.
My name is Carry Pesch, Managing Director for Medcon International, part of the Global Learning Collaborative, and we are part of the Good CME Practice Group from its start.
Hi, everyone. Melanie Fleeman. I work at Bayer. I lead the patient and scientific engagement team across all of our pharma therapeutic areas, and this is in our global medical and evidence team. I've been with Bayer for 10 years, and I've been in the industry for more than 15. I'm happy to be here. Over to you, Nefeli.
Thanks. My name is Nefeli Georgoulia, and I'm a Senior Global Medical Affairs Lead at AstraZeneca in our oncology solid tumor practice. And yes, I've been maybe in this position for about 4 years and at AZ about 8 years. Great to be here.
Thank you all. Okay, so to get started, we have a few important topics to cover today, so we will jump right in. And our first topic is really about the importance of IME and CME. So I'm going to ask you, Nefeli, why is CME and IME important, and how is it aligned in the medical affairs strategy?
Absolutely. So obviously, it's very important to us to that the physicians know about our new data, right, in our new drugs. And we do a lot of activities within medical affairs to ensure that is the case. A lot of what we do is industry-sponsored symposia, for example, at congresses and advisory boards and whatnot. But these are all from us, right? Also our medical science liaisons that will go, and discuss with physicians the new data. But this is all always AstraZeneca talking to the physician, and that's where CME comes in, and why really we have a love of CME and love to plan those as well alongside our more kind of like industry generated strategies, because it's a third party kind of like independent provider, and it no longer basically has the lens of like the pharmaceutical company planning it and the inputting on the content, but it kind of like stands on its own. And it's another way basically to reach physicians that is more, objective, I would say.
Perfect. Thank you, Nefeli. And Melanie, did you want to add anything, or shall we move on to the next question?
I think we can move, yeah.
Perfect.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Nefeli. That's great insights to really see that CME has a place in the strategy next to your company-led initiatives. And of course, what is the value of CME and IME? I think a lot has to do with what are you going to get back from the CME programs, and then of course outcomes come up. So Melanie, for you, could you explain to us how you measure value of CME and how important outcomes play a part in that?
Absolutely. This is a really important question for us. As Nefeli said, we believe that CME and IME has a really important place in helping us to achieve our strategies. but it's really important that we follow through with that so we can really learn the most and get the most value out of investing in these programs, because it is an investment. A lot of times these programs do come with, high dollar value. And so again, it's really important that we have the follow through. So there's a few different things that we try to do. One thing is we always try to have somebody from the company alive there at the programs, whether it's online or whether it's a live event. We always try to have somebody there so they can experience firsthand, how did it go? How was the education? How did the audience respond to it? Especially if we're trying something new, if it's a new format or a new type of education. And then once we get those outcomes reports, there's a lot of information there. It can't necessarily be shared, right, in that huge chunk of information. So we really try to dive in and think about how can we tease out some of the really important tidbits here that will be really impactful for the internal teams. So for example, we might not just report that there were 5,000 learners. We might say there was 5,000 learners and this many actually came from these really important markets for us. So really just teasing that apart. We look a lot at the learning, kind of what's happening in those pre and post tests to show that the education is having impact. And then also the intent to change. Often it's free text, but it's really important that we look through that to see, okay, how were they? We always want to spur people to some sort of action through our education. And so what action are they inspired to take from this education? And I think as we go forward in the future, I know it was a question that came in too about AI, so I'll just touch on it. But for us, how we analyze the activities and how we analyze the outcomes reports, we're just starting to see how we can use our AI tools internally to scan through those transcripts, to scan through those outcomes reports, and either help us generate summaries or identify trends and gaps or even sentiment. And so these are things we're kind of just at the cusp of trying to work out.
Well, that's great. That's a great list of all kind of elements that you're mentioning there, and I think the reach, number of engagements, where people come from, all of that is, of course, to be expected. And one of the questions that we got from the survey, and thanks so much for putting the questions to us. Are there any specific elements that are going to help you internally to elevate the value of IME CME, Melanie? Is there anything that kind of strikes you as the most important element?
So I think probably the most important element is the impact and how we're going to measure the impact of that education. And I think now, different providers can provide different things. I think if you think about, the data that there may be that may be accessible for US audiences versus, ex-US. I know for US, for example, sometimes you can get claims level data where you can that can be used for audience targeting or even to evaluate what has changed after, before and after the education. We can't always get the same data ex-US, but sometimes there's ways to get to something similar. So again, I think how we show the impact, that's the question we get the most often. How do we know it's worth it? Sure, the 5,000 people participated, but did they actually learn anything? Are they actually going to change anything? So how we can evaluate that impact, I think, is the most important thing.
Thank you so much. And before I hand it over to you, Katie, Nefeli, do you have anything to add from your perspective, from your company?
Yeah, no, this is a very comprehensive response. And I think, yeah, it also like probably depends a little bit on how much convincing you have to do within your organization to spend part of your budget on CME. I'd say I haven't had to leverage a lot of kind of like that data, kind of like showing behavior change and whatnot, just because there is an expectation that part of our budget every year will be spent on CME. So I hadn't necessarily had to fight to justify that, So yeah, so I'll stick with Melanie's response on this one.
Thank you, Melanie and Nefeli. Yeah, so that actually, Nefeli, leads into kind of the next question or next kind of theme that we were going to discuss, which was about, if you do have the budget there, and you are supporting CME and IME programs, how do you evaluate proposals? Like what does that look like for you in terms of what is a good proposal? And what are the key factors that are influencing you supporting a specific proposal?
Absolutely. Yeah, and we do have to weed through a lot of proposals every year. So I would say that it's really important, at least to me, that the proposal is tailored to what we're trying to do in our team, right? So, for example, often we'll get a proposal and it's for the wrong drug, right? Because we are, lung cancer oncology, but within lung cancer, I think kind of like there's three different teams with the three different drugs, right? And then you get a proposal, and it's so generic that it will encompass all three of our drugs, right? And get it addressed to our team. That's not going to work. So I think it's really important for the person on the other end writing the proposal to kind of like really do the due diligence, maybe even speak to the stakeholders, right, beforehand to really understand what the pain points are and who works on what and what are they trying to achieve before putting pen to paper. And along those lines, also like a lot of times, like the geographic reach of the program is really important. I'll think of a couple of examples within our company where it's a drug where the disease is more prevalent in Asia, or like the mutation, for example, that the drug is targets more prevalent in Asia. It's going to be important them to know like what's going to be the the physician reach and by geography, right? Okay, like yes, some US physicians, some European physicians, but will there be enough representation? Is the program being translated into other languages, and will be broadcasted kind of like in the geographies that they care about? I think that's really important. And along those lines, I think it's very important the specialty reach. And I myself work on resectable studies within AstraZeneca. And we know, for example, that thoracic surgeons are like a key stakeholder alongside medical oncologists in the patient journey. And so, being able to actually address both of these specialties with a CME activity is also very important to me every time I evaluate the proposal. Yes, I think kind of like these are some of the elements of really tailor it to your stakeholder and then think about what's important to them that they're trying to get out of it as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nefeli, for that insight. I'm going to actually ask another question here because I think it goes, one of the questions that came in from the audience in pre-registration, because I think it speaks to what we're talking about in terms of evaluation. So, there's this whole idea of, innovation and, what that looks like in terms of a CME or IME program. How important is that to you in the review process in terms of, innovation, whatever that looks like, or is it just innovation for innovation's sake?
Okay, I'll take a stab at this, and then Melanie, I'm curious to hear also what you think. I Oh my God, I hope this doesn't make me sound 1,000 years old, but in the time of AI, I am so suspicious of innovation because, like, a lot of times and this is not just CME, this cross evaluating a lot of different vendors that we work with. When I see the word AI there, I almost think that, I give permission for a robot to write out kind of like the program. So I think, but don't get me wrong. Listen, I think innovation, when it's done, is executed well and with purpose, and it has kind of like a clear objective. Um, like for example, Katie, like the engagement of the learners. For example, if like you have like a nifty way of making it so that the learners are more engaged, it's a great thing, but not innovation for innovation's sake. And yeah, and like AI in the context of CME doesn't get me excited. It just gets me worried when I see that word. I don't know, Melanie, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's, yeah, how you use it, right? I mean, I think for us, innovation is really important, but I think it depends how you define what innovation is, right? Because it could mean a lot of different things. So in terms of, I think we have to be always changing with the times. And so what does that look like? It might be we want to explore new formats for education, or like new types of programs or new capabilities. So with AI, there may be new capabilities to actually target the audience. Because Nefeli, you mentioned targeting the audience is something that's really critical, right? So a lot of times with access to data, with some AI tools, and all the data that the providers have about their audience, then sometimes you can really get more specific in how you target the audience, because that's really important for us. We want to know that the education is reaching the right people. I think we don't want to just support the same, okay, this is a case study based program. This is a roundtable discussion. Of course, we do those, and those are standard classic things that won't change. But we also want to see, okay, what's new, right? How are people paying attention differently, right? Modular content wasn't really a thing before, and now it is. And now it's actually a big deal because the way we learn and the way we pay attention has actually been kind of changing and evolving. And so I think from that perspective, innovation is important because we want to make sure we're always kind of moving with however the
Time.
field is moving.
Yeah.
Thank you, Melanie.
Hmm.
And before we move on, Kari, because we do need to move on, but one just really quickly, Melanie or Nefeli, in terms of CME, so accredited education versus independent medical education, because this is also a question we're getting from the audience. What is CME? Does it need to be accredited? Can it be IME? I mean, I know that we're talking about more of the ex-US space in being the European CME group. And we know in the US that obviously that is different, but how does that affect your, proposal selection?
I mean, I can start. I think for us, it's not like we go all one or all the other. We sort of have a mix. So yes, we do some, kind of CME accredited programs, but we also support quite a lot of IME as well. I saw this question come in, so I did ask some of the team, and it was consistent with my experience, which is we haven't seen any differences in terms of participation in the programs, whether it's accredited or not. So I think for us, more important than the accreditation is it the right education, and will it reach the right audience? And Nefeli, I'd love to hear how you guys
Yeah.
approach it.
Yeah, I think we just support CME, to be honest. And maybe it stems from the naive assumption that, all the doctors have to fulfill some CME every year. So by putting yourself in that category, you maximize the chances that the program will be watched. But Melanie, you're saying actually you haven't seen a difference
Yeah.
between the two. So actually that's very interesting because we're operating under that assumption. But then I think kind of probably also another element is we do a lot of, as I was saying, we do kind of like a lot of industry sponsored activities that are with an educational objective, where it's kind of like our teams executing on those. So yeah, so that maybe that also factors into it then. So that when we support something external, it tends to be kind of like a CME accredited program.
Thank you, Nefeli. Over to you, Kari.
Yeah, thanks so much. And maybe it also gives that stamp of objectivity
Yeah.
and third party delivery for sure. Yeah. Yeah, and another element that also came through the survey, but also something that we've discussed up front, is budget. of course, you have a lot of other priorities within the company, and we would like to understand a bit better from you when we look at budget alignment internally. Is it a part of the medical affairs budget? What factors influence the budget availability for you, for IME, for CME? Melanie, could you explain to us a bit how things are on your side?
Yeah, yeah, and here I think for Nefeli and I, our situation is probably a little bit different, but yeah, for us, budget is always a challenge. And I know a question came in too about is it kind of one pot of money that everybody's sharing? Um, it- and at least now for Bayer, the answer to that is yes. But even before, when we had kind of a separate medical affairs budget, um, teams are still looking across the brand. What are we spending the money on, and where's the best place to spend it to achieve the things that we want to achieve, and make sure we hit all our objectives. So we've always had to make sure that we're giving good justification. As I said, sometimes the programs can have high dollar amounts. So one thing we think about is we don't just try to push forward programs that are $250,000 or more. We really do try to get a balance. So some kind of maybe lower cost programs or multi-support programs, and then maybe some single support programs, which might be a little bit higher. We usually do have to, and that's why I'm saying for the proposals, it really is important of how we show impact. How are we maybe innovating with this education? Because we do have to make a strong case for why we think this budget for CMEs is justified. Often if there's budget cuts, these are the easiest things to say, oh, we'll just do a few less programs. And so but we don't want that, right? We all really strongly believe that this type of education is really critical. We want all of the healthcare stakeholders as well as patients to be educated on guidelines, on new treatments, who's the right patient for what products. So we think this education is really critical. But yeah, I think for us, we do have to, and that's why we also spend a lot of time analyzing the outcomes reports, because if we can show them, hey, not only do we have strong proposals that are going to help us achieve these objectives, but when we've done programs in the past from these providers, here are all the ways that it's been really impactful education. And so we know that we're going to get a good program. We know it's going to have impact. And then therefore, it's really worth the investment for the company.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
thank you. Yeah.
I'm like in a different boat there because there's always budget earmarked for CME basically within the medical affairs budget every year. And but what is very frustrating probably for CME providers is that the budget items are tied to drug launches. And so then you get into that situation where you're waiting for a launch, but if for whatever reason the clinical trial is delayed, or whatever happened, there's some uncertainty always with these timelines, right? And so you can, you don't know, basically it's gated on getting clinical trial results. So you're a bit in limbo basically. So I think that's the hardest thing to contend with. And it's important basically to write proposals in an agile way, probably is what I've learned, where we could support basically that proposal, whether the study reads out positive or negative, where it hits, more birds. Yeah, it's like maybe across 2 or 3 of our programs, kind of like that proposal. So like the CME can go ahead even if a study gets delayed or like doesn't hit that year or something like that. So I think that kind of strategy has been helpful in the past.
Thank you. And just time flies as always. There's a question that just came in, which I think is of interest. I think there's been a lot of debate on where budget accents are lying. Is it more the promotional or client initiated or the IME CME side of things? Of course, from providers, you request the outcomes and insights. And how do you compare how your own client-initiated activities have done and what the results are there. Is there a way to fair balance the results for either side of the coin? Melanie?
Yeah, I saw that question come in. It's a good question. I mean, I think to a certain extent, it's not really comparable, right? It's not really like apples and apples, because one of the reasons that we can kind of get some of these outcomes is because as providers, you have a lot of data about the people who are within the network and participating in these programs. I think for ours, it's just a little different, right? So to a certain extent, you just can't get the same outcomes. There's certain things you can do. You can, and we do put in some interactivity. So you kind of do those pre and post, questions, maybe in a more subtle way where it's about generating interactivity within the program. And we do ask for feedback, but I just think it's different. We're a pharma company, we're sponsoring it. We sort of have the control or the perceived control over the content that's in that program.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't expect our outcomes to be exactly the same. Also, we don't have the same reach. And that's one of the reasons why we argue that it's really important for us to do this independent education, because as a medical team, we can't market programs at all, right? We're not marketers. And so we reach who's in the room. And maybe if we make a recording and we can post it somewhere, that's nice too, but we just can't have the same
Right.
reach as the, independent education providers. So I think to a certain extent, yeah, I'm not sure that we're going to get the same results from pharma programs or IMEs. I don't know,
I have a
Nefeli, if you,
Yeah, I agree 100% because like the closest thing that we do is industry sponsor symposia, but it's who's in the room, right? And then for most congresses, the symposia don't even get recorded and posted online because they're industry sponsored. So it's just like, um, and so yeah, it just doesn't even compare. I think kind of like the evergreen nature of the CME and that it's online and it will be active there for like a prolonged period of time for providers to watch. We can't really compete with that on the industry side.
Well, those are good arguments to the question from Anders. How do you promote it internally? I think those are a couple of good arguments there.
Mm-hmm.
Katie.
Yeah, no, I was just looking. So now, so we've kind of covered the bulk of the discussion points that we wanted, and we've woven some of the questions that we received from the audience in. We have time to potentially answer a few more questions before we close the webinar. There is one question, obviously CME aims to impact patient care. And there is one question that came in about effectively measuring outcome CME activities on patient management, and what does that mean or look like to you within your organization? I know it's a bit of a broad question, but if you have any insights as to that question.
Maybe I can start on this one. We have some initiatives and now at AZ that are trying to measure guideline concordant care. Basically, this is something that's important to us because you realize that in a lot of areas, even just if we look at the US, right? I'm not even going to go outside and think about maybe like a developing country. Even in areas of the US that are maybe kind of like more remote or underserved or it's like an urban setting, but it's a hospital basically that sees mostly underserved kind of like population. You see that treatments aren't offered that are standard of care, right? And so I think there is now kind of like a big focus in our company about health equity, and from there stems kind of like a desire and efforts we're making to measure guideline concordant care and even kind of like support solutions that it are by the bedside and suggest maybe a treatment to the doctor, kind of like that integrate with the EMR, things like that. So I can tell you that we now have a way to absolutely see the impact on CME on guideline concordant care, but I could tell you that it's also very high interest to us and kind of like to do better basically on that metric 100%. It's a big area of focus.
Thank you, Nefeli. We do have time. I'm just going to get one more question in here. We have a question about, oh, it just went. So there is one question, and it's related to the last topic of budget, where it was in general, if you're looking at global medical affairs budgets being spent, is it proportionate with CME, IME, and industry-led med-ed, or is there a disproportion swinging one way or the other?
I don't think there's a one size fits all answer to that question. I think it really depends on the product. It depends on where it is in the life cycle. It also depends on the team. Sometimes the team feels like for whatever reason, it would be better to do CMEs rather than industry sponsored or the reverse, right? They think, no, we really need to have, we want to have more, control. We want these to be industry sponsored and we do less CMEs. So I don't, and I think things always swing from year to year as well. So I think the answer is going to be different, right? For all the products and each year.
I agree. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, we have come to the end of our webinar, and I myself would like to thank our panel. Thank you, Nefeli, Melanie, Carry. Thank you very much for participating. This was a very valuable conversation for our CME community in Europe specifically.
That was gCMEp members Katie Eustace and Carry Pesch in conversation with Melanie Fleeman and Nefeli Georgoulia, discussing the value of CME, IME and medical affairs educational strategies. The Good CME Practice Group is a membership organisation for CME providers based in Europe that aims to promote professionalism within the European CME provider community. More information can be found on the group's website gCMEp.org. Thank you for listening, and join us for more episodes as we explore all things CME CPD.